ready throttle.
Welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at one of the most thoroughly built 1987 Buick Grand Nationals to ever cross the auction block. This car spent 18 years and a multi-year build cycle in one owner's hands before going up at Bring a Trailer this past October, where it sold for $84,000. The seller is Billet Motorsports out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and what they delivered is not just a clean Grand National. It is a fully reimagined turbo Buick built around a stroker 249 cubic inch V6, a precision 6765 turbocharger, and a 4-speed automatic that was hand-built by Dave Husek. Let's break down every detail.
To go at full weight, 9/8 capable, so that's fantastic, and I can't wait to test drive it.
Pop the hood and the engine bay tells you immediately that this is no stock Turbo 6. The original 231 cubic inch turbo V6 has been replaced by a fully forged Weber Power Products built 249 cubic inch stroker. Inside the block sits a SCAT forged crankshaft, Molnar connecting rods, and diamond racing pistons. Billet main caps and an RJC girdle keep the bottom end stable under the boost loads this engine routinely sees. Champion ported iron cylinder heads and a Champion ported intake manifold sit up top, fed by an Accufab 70mm throttle body and an Accufab plenum.
Updated bumper fillers, which are painted properly. Your bezels for your headlights have been painted.
Look closely and you can see the precision 210 by 210 roller camshaft, the Hartland Sharp 1.65 roller rockers, and the BHJ external balancer, all working together to handle high RPM operation. An RJC 3-inch downpipe routes the spent gases out of the turbo. The intercooler is an RJC mega cooler. The radiator is an aluminum unit, and twin Intrepid electric fans pull air through it. A Turbo Saver external oil filter mount sits within reach for service. Every wire is sleeved. Every hose is custom routed. The bay is a study in functional fabrication.
The hood. So underneath the hood, you have a Weber stroker motor. That's 249.
The fuel system is built for serious power. A Walboro 525 Hellcat fuel pump sits in a billet aluminum super pumper hanger with a -8 outlet and a -6 return, fully E85 compatible. 80-pound Siemens fuel injectors deliver the fuel, and an Accufab adjustable fuel pressure regulator keeps line pressure dialed in. On top of that, an Alkycontrol progressive alcohol injection system runs 100% methanol through a single nozzle. That gives the engine a cooling charge and an effective octane boost on demand whenever the boost climbs.
It's are original, minor imperfections on just some of the glass components.
The heart of the boost system is the Precision 6765 turbocharger. It uses a billet compressor wheel, a ported S-cover with a 4-inch inlet and 2.5-inch outlet, and a .63 AR ported exhaust housing. A heavy-duty external wastegate combined with an RJC boost controller gives the driver fine control over peak boost. A Buick Racing turbo heat shield protects nearby components, and Postons exhaust headers route the exhaust pulses straight into the turbo. This combination is good for very serious power on pump and methanol.
Fun. Shifts nicely.
All of that power feeds through a Dave Husek-built 4-speed automatic transmission. Husek transmissions are some of the most respected units in the turbo Buick world, and this one comes paired with a Husek 245mm high-stall torque converter for instant boost response off the line. A B&M external transmission cooler handles heat. A Hughes deep sump pan adds capacity. The drive shaft is a Denny's 3-inch steel unit with a Metco drive shaft loop for safety. Out back, a quick performance 9-inch rear end takes over with a Yukon gear 3.4-to-1 center section and 31 spline Moser axles.
Horsepower is 16 pounds, so we have the dyno sheet from Cal Hartline below. If I downshift it, hopefully you guys are enjoying the turbo sounds.
Now let's check out the trunk. This is where you see how thorough the build really was. The trunk floor is finished in clean carpet. Tucked back behind the rear seat is a 10-inch Alpine subwoofer mounted in a custom enclosure, paired with the retro sound digital stereo head unit up front. The factory Buick Motorsport branded mat sits in the trunk well. A small fire extinguisher is mounted within reach. Even the storage compartments under the deck show no rust, no scuffing, and no shortcuts. Everything has been refinished or replaced as part of the multi-year completion in 2025.
Oil pressure is at around 55 pounds. Transmission temp is fine. We haven't really gotten it hot. Power seat operates. Windshield wipers do operate, and the T-tops come off, so that's fun. You can get into it.
Open the doors and you will see this Grand National was finished with the same level of detail inside. The door panels show clean upholstery work in black and sand gray cloth. The original armrest pulls have been preserved. The window switches sit in their factory locations. Even the hidden interior panels behind the rear seat back have been retrimmed. Look at the door bottoms and you will not find rust pinholes or seam splits, which is a common Grand National problem after 30-plus years. This car has clearly been kept indoors and well cared for.
It makes. All right, let's let it build up. We're gonna stay in second. I'm gonna roll into it. Ready?
In the audio department, that 10-inch Alpine subwoofer in the trunk delivers low-end punch without dominating the cabin. It pairs with the front-mounted retro sound digital head unit, which retains the factory single DIN dash slot, but adds Bluetooth audio streaming and modern source options. The Buick Motorsport trunk mat is a nice nod to the heritage. Open one of the doors fully, and you will see the contrast between the gloss black exterior and the soft sand gray cloth, which gives the car a much warmer cabin tone than a typical all-black Turbo 6 interior would feel.
Obviously.
Now let's walk around to the door sills and check the bodywork. The car was repainted in black under prior ownership, and the seller is up front that there are some paint and body blemishes visible in the gallery if you look hard. They also note window rattles and some wind noise, which is honest and refreshing for a car at this price point. The lower rocker panels and the door bottoms look clean. The body lines down the side are arrow straight. The factory ground effects, the side trim, and the rear quarter creases all line up without any wave or dip.
All right, but get off this channel.
Step closer and you can see the headlight cluster has been upgraded to LED units, which give it a much sharper light pattern than the original sealed beam setup. The fiberglass front bumper fillers have been replaced. They are the part that always cracks and sags on these cars, so it is good to see fresh ones here. The sport mirrors are factory style. The factory power antenna has been removed for a cleaner profile, and the door handles have been preserved in their original chrome finish.
Let's put the lights on. First set of bumps, no issues.
Climb inside and the cabin retains every Grand National signature. The factory steering wheel has been rewrapped in fresh leather. The dash retains the digital speedometer and digital tachometer that buyers loved in 1987. The factory boost gauge is in place, but a full set of supplemental Autometer Sport comp gauges has been added for boost, oil pressure, and transmission temperature. A fast digital display is mounted to the windshield to show real-time tuning data from the fast XFI Sportsman ECU. Step inside this Grand National, and the build philosophy carries straight through. The cabin keeps the original turbo Buick architecture, but every wear surface has been refreshed, and many key controls upgraded for both function and feel. The seats are factory-style buckets, reupholstered in a black and sand gray cloth combination, with subtle Turbo 6 embroidery on the headrests as a nod to the power plant under the hood. The bolsters are tight, the foam is fresh, and the pattern lays cleanly across the seat backs. Sliding behind the wheel, you are greeted by a re-wrapped leather steering wheel that feels noticeably thicker and grippier than the spongy factory original. The horn pad still wears the Buick crest, but the rest of the wheel has been brought up to modern standards. Your eyes then fall on the digital speedometer and tack replacements that swap the lazy, original sweep needles for crisp, instantly readable digits. Every gauge in this car has been chosen with one priority in mind, which is being able to monitor a high-boost turbo motor in real time without taking your eyes off the road for any longer than necessary. The center stack carries the largest single cosmetic upgrade in the cabin, a retro sound Bluetooth head unit that fits the original radio opening but adds full streaming audio, hands-free calling, and modern equalizer control. Below it, the heating and air conditioning controls remain in their factory positions, although the seller has noted that the air conditioning system has a slow leak and would benefit from a recharge and a service. To the right of the radio, an Alkycontrol methanol injection switch panel sits within easy reach, so the driver can confirm the system is armed before each pull. The dash pad itself looks clean and uncracked, which on a 1987 G-body is rare and worth pointing out. Door panels appear to have been refreshed in matching cloth and vinyl. The door pulls are tight, and the power window switches operate as designed, although the seller mentions a couple of light rattles in the windows themselves at certain speeds. The carpet is in good shape, with no visible wear at the heel pads or under the pedals. Floor mats keep things looking factory clean. Look up and the headliner remains taut with no sagging, which is again uncommon for a car of this vintage. Look down and the original column shifter has been retained and recalibrated to work with the 4-speed automatic that sits behind the Stroker V6. Pull on the parking brake handle and you will find that this is one of the items the seller has flagged as not currently functional, which is something a buyer would want to address before storing the car on any incline. The rear seat carries the same sand gray cloth treatment as the fronts, and the rear bench is split in the factory pattern with the center fold-down armrests still operating correctly. Rear seat belts are present, in good condition, and retract smoothly. Rear quarter trim panels match the doors. The rear deck speaker grills have been left in place for visual consistency, but the actual audio heavy lifting now happens up front and behind the seats, where a 10-inch Alpine subwoofer has been mounted in a custom enclosure to give the retro sound head unit some real low-end authority. None of these interior touches scream for attention on their own, but together they show the same level of consideration as everything mechanical on the car. The most striking feature inside the cabin is the fast XFI display unit mounted at the base of the windshield. This is the live data window into the engine management system, and it tells you everything that the Autometer Sport comp gauges in the A-pillar pod cannot. Air-fuel ratio, manifold pressure, intake air temperature, ignition timing, knock retard, and methanol injection duty cycle all flow across the small color screen in real time. For a car putting down this kind of boost on pump fuel with methanol assist, that level of feedback is not optional. It is the difference between catching a developing problem early and grenading the bottom end on a wide-open third-gear pull. The A-pillar gauge pod itself carries 3 Autometer Sport comp analog units, with the most prominent being a boost gauge that reads well into the high 20s. The needle position is reassuring on a casual drive and instantly informative when the throttle is buried. A fuel pressure gauge sits next to it, which matters because this car is running an 80-pound-per-hour Siemens injector setup fed by a Walboro 525 Hellcat lift pump in a billet hanger. If fuel pressure ever sags under load, the driver sees it immediately. The third gauge in the pod monitors transmission temperature, which is critical given the high stall converter and aggressive shift schedule of the Husek-built 4-speed automatic. The tune itself was developed by Cal Hartline and Norbs, two names that anyone in the turbo Buick community will recognize on sight. The car runs a 3-bar map sensor for accurate readings up into serious boost territory, and the calibration is dialed in for both daily street use and full pulls on premium pump fuel with methanol injection backing it up. The methanol system is a single-nozzle Alkycontrol setup, plumbed cleanly into the intake tract and triggered through the fast XFI based on boost pressure and intake air temperature. This combination, methanol injection plus a properly tuned standalone, is what allows the car to make safe, reliable, repeatable power numbers without resorting to race fuel. Walking around the car at idle, you can hear the full mechanical signature of the build. The 210 by 210 precision turbo cam, working through Hartland Sharp 1.65 ratio rocker arms, gives the motor a slightly aggressive lope at idle that is unmistakably modified, but does not cross over into impractical or rough. Blip the throttle and the precision 67-65 spools quickly thanks to the ported S-cover with the 4-inch inlet and 2.5-inch outlet, paired to the .63 AR turbine housing. The exhaust note from the Postons headers feeding the RJC 3-inch downpipe and the GN1 3-inch stainless catback with dual outlets at the rear bumper is deep and authoritative without being obnoxiously loud. Cold start behavior is clean, idle quality is steady, there is no smoke, no fuel smell, no obvious vacuum leak. Everything about how the car presents itself at idle suggests a turbo Buick that has been sorted, debugged, and tuned by people who genuinely understand the platform. This is not a car that has been thrown together quickly and listed for sale. Step back outside, walk the car from front to rear, and the exterior tells the same story of methodical build quality. The original GM blackout treatment is preserved everywhere it should be, from the grille and headlight bezels, to the side trim, to the rear bumper accents and the deck lid spoiler. The paint itself is the original factory black, and the seller is honest about its condition. There are some minor blemishes scattered across the body if you look closely under direct light, particularly along the upper edges of the doors and on a couple of horizontal panels. None of it rises to the level of needing a respray, and on a 38-year-old G-body that has clearly been driven and enjoyed, this is the kind of patina that most enthusiasts actually appreciate. The black surface still pulls strong reflections, the panel gaps are even, and the trim is straight and aligned. The hood opens to reveal an engine bay that is presented with real intent. The plenum and throttle body sit centered and high. The Accufab 70mm throttle body and Accufab plenum dominate the visual layout, and the upper intake plumbing has been routed for both function and visual cleanliness. Wires are loomed and tucked. Hoses are clamped properly. The Champion ported iron heads sit just below the visible plenum, pushing the airflow numbers far past what any factory Turbo 6 could achieve. The Precision 67-65 turbocharger lives on the passenger side, mounted to a set of Postons headers that route exhaust pulses cleanly into the turbine housing. The compressor outlet feeds a polished intercooler piping run that crosses the front of the engine bay, drops through a properly sized front-mount intercooler, and returns to the throttle body on the driver's side. The methanol injection nozzle is plumbed in line in this intake tract, and the Alkycontrol pump and reservoir live in their own clean mounting location in the engine bay. Battery has been relocated for weight balance and for accessibility around the turbo plumbing. The radiator and electric fan setup is appropriately sized for a high-horsepower turbo build sitting in stop-and-go South Florida traffic. Under hood, you can also see the fast XFI Sportsman ECU mounted in a clean location with proper strain relief on the harness. This is what receives signals from the 3-bar manifold pressure sensor, the wideband oxygen sensor in the downpipe, the air temp sensor in the intake, and the various other inputs around the engine, then makes real-time fueling and ignition decisions on every revolution. Cap covers, brake fluid reservoir, master cylinder, all the visible service items have been kept clean. None of them have been chromed or dressed up for show. They simply look like they have been maintained by someone who actually services this car and uses it. Close the hood and step around to the front 3/4 view, and the proportions of the lowered stance show off the fitment of the Billet Specialties OE Series staggered 18-inch wheels. The car sits exactly the way a serious turbo Buick build is supposed to sit, with body lines parallel to the ground and the wheels filling the arches without rubbing. Drop down underneath the car, and you will find that the chassis work matches the engine work in scope and quality. The front suspension uses Bilstein shocks paired with Eibach lowering springs, which together provide a controlled ride height drop without the harshness that comes from cheaper coilover setups. QA1 tubular A-arms replace the factory-stamped steel pieces, both reducing unsprung weight and correcting suspension geometry for the new ride height. QA1 also supplies the front and rear sway bars, which are sized appropriately for the additional grip available from the modern tire compounds and wheel sizes. UMI performance control arms are used in the rear, which is the standard upgrade for any G-body that is going to see real horsepower applied to the road. The factory rear control arm bushings cannot deal with the kind of loads that a built Turbo 6 puts down, and they will visibly flex and deflect under hard launches. The UMI arms eliminate that deflection entirely and keep the rear axle planted under the car instead of skipping sideways. Speaking of the rear axle, the factory 8.5-inch 10-bolt has been removed entirely and replaced with a quick performance 9-inch unit. This is the right call for any Grand National that is making meaningful boost. A 9-inch housing with a billet center section paired with the 31-spline Moser axles is essentially indestructible at street horsepower levels. The Yukon Gear 3.4-to-1 center section gives the car a useful balance of acceleration off the line and reasonable cruising RPM at highway speeds. Above the rear axle, the floor pan has been notched to allow the larger axle housing to articulate fully without contacting the body, which is a sign that the build has been done properly rather than just bolted in and called done. The rear shock setup mirrors the front in using Bilstein dampers, which keep the rear axle planted on launch and prevent wheel hop, especially when paired with the upgraded control arms and the Metco driveshaft loop. The driveshaft itself is a Denny's 3-inch steel unit, sized appropriately for the torque output and rotating speeds of the 4-speed automatic and the deeper rear gearing. The Metco driveshaft loop is mounted just behind the transmission tail and serves as a critical safety component, keeping the driveshaft from flailing into the cabin floor in the event of a U-joint failure during a hard launch. Brake hardware visible underneath includes the Wilwood 6-piston front calipers and the 4-piston rear calipers, both paired with slotted and cross-drilled rotors. The brake lines and proportioning hardware all appear to be in good order, with no visible leaks or corrosion at the fittings. The exhaust system is one of the cleanest-looking components under the car. From the RJC 3-inch downpipe through the GN1 3-inch stainless midpipe and out to the dual-exit rear of the GN1 catback, every joint is clean, every hanger is in place, and the system tucks up against the floor instead of hanging in the breeze. There is no rust, no patchwork, and no obvious heat damage to anything nearby. Looking at the wheels in detail, the Billet Specialties OE Series choice is one of the most thoughtful aesthetic decisions on the entire car. These wheels visually echo the original factory Grand National wheel design with that distinctive directional spoke pattern, but they are produced as a modern 18-inch staggered set with proper offsets for a lower G-body. The fronts are sized to clear the larger Wilwood 6-piston calipers and the cross-drilled and slotted front rotors, while the rears are wider to accept the meatier rear tire that puts the power down. The finish is a polished spoke face with a contrasting darker pocket between the spokes, which gives the wheel real depth in person, especially against the matte black tire sidewalls. Tire selection on a turbo Buick is one of the most consequential choices a builder can make, and this car runs Nitto rubber on all four corners, with two different compounds chosen for the front and the rear. The fronts wear Nitto 555 G2 tires, which are a high-performance dry and wet street tire with predictable steering response and plenty of cold grip. They are also rated for sustained highway speeds, which matters on a car that owners typically take to events hours away from home. The rears wear Nitto NT 555 R2 tires, which are a drag radial style compound. They have the meatier shoulder blocks, the softer rubber, and the closer void pattern that you need to actually hook up serious power to a flat surface. This is a meaningful choice. Plenty of high horsepower turbo Buicks suffer from being under-tired in the rear, where they will smoke the tires through first and second gear and never actually deliver their power to the pavement. The NT 555 R2 compound, sized appropriately to the rear arch clearance on a notched chassis, gives this car a real fighting chance to convert boost into forward motion. Combined with the quick performance 9-inch, the Yukon 340 gearing, the Husek built 4-speed automatic with the high stall converter, and the UMI control arms keeping the axle planted, this car is set up to launch hard and consistently. Looking at the chassis from the side, the lowered stance is aggressive without being cartoonish. There is still suspension travel available, which means the car can be driven on real roads with real expansion joints and pavement brakes without scraping the front air dam or bottoming out the rear. This is a balance that takes time to dial in, and the seller has clearly put in that time. Roll the car forward a foot, look at the front edge of the front tire and the rear edge of the rear tire, and the offset numbers reveal themselves. The wheels sit nearly flush with the fender lip front and rear, which is the visually correct stance for this generation of G-body. They do not poke out aggressively, and they do not sit recessed inside the wells. They sit exactly where they should sit, which is the result of getting wheel offset and tire size and ride height all correct simultaneously. Stepping back to take in the studio shots that the seller commissioned, you can really appreciate the proportions of this build. From the front three-quarter view, the car presents a clean, flat, lowered profile with the front fascia cleanly aligned, the headlights tight and unfaded, and the chrome accents around the grille and along the side glass appearing sharp and reflective. The hood gap, the door gaps, and the fender to bumper alignment are all where they should be. The original factory black paint has the depth that only 38-year-old single-stage paint can really show, with that slightly soft surface character that no modern clear coat reproduces convincingly. From the rear three-quarter view, the dual exhaust outlets exit cleanly out of the rear valance. The deck lid spoiler stands proud at the proper rake, and the fender to quarter alignment is straight. The Buick badging on the trunk lid is intact, the tail lamp lenses are uncracked, and the chrome bumper accents reflect the studio lighting evenly. The straight side profile shot is what really sells the proportions. With the 18-inch staggered Billet Specialties wheels, the lowered ride height, and the original blackout trim treatment along the rocker panels and the window surrounds, this Grand National looks like exactly what it is, which is a serious purpose-built turbo Buick that has been carried over from the original GM concept and pushed forward into a modern interpretation. The car does not pretend to be anything other than what it is, and what it is one of the highest specification turbo Buick builds you can find without commissioning your own. Walking around to the badging details, the Grand National script across the rear quarter panel is intact and properly placed, with no scratches, no peeling edges, and no missing letters. The Buick crest on the hood and on the trunk are intact. The factory Turbo 6 callouts on the front fenders are present. None of these details have been removed for a smooth look, and none of them have been replaced with non-original aftermarket parts. The seller has resisted the temptation that some builders fall into of trying to make a modified Grand National look like a custom show car. Instead, every visual modification this car carries is functional first and aesthetic second, with the only exception being the wheel choice, which is itself a tribute to the original factory design. The bumpers are straight, the chrome is clean, the rubber bumper inserts are intact, and the front and rear license plate frames are in their original positions. From the engine bay, to the chassis, to the cabin, to the wheel and tire package, to the paint and trim, this is a thoroughly considered build that has been executed by people who understand what makes the platform special. The build budget on this car, before the auction premium, easily exceeds the sale price by a significant margin. Moving parts alone, the fast XFI, the precision turbocharger, the Husek transmission, the quick performance rear, the Wilwood brakes, the Bilstein and QA1 suspension, all add up quickly when you start ordering them. A few final notes from the seller's disclosure that any buyer should pay attention to. The air conditioning system has a known leak and would benefit from a service before being relied on for daily Florida summer driving. The parking brake is currently non-functional and would need to be addressed by the next owner, which is a relatively straightforward repair on a G-body. The fuel gauge is described as lazy in its sweep, meaning the readings can lag behind actual tank level. Some minor paint blemishes are present across the body, none rising to the level of needing significant repair, but worth noting on a sale at this price level. There are some light window rattles at certain speeds, which is consistent with the age of the car and the standard window regulator design of the G-body chassis. None of these flags are deal breakers. None of them affect the mechanical integrity, the engine, the transmission, or the suspension of the car. They are the kind of items that any honest seller of a 38-year-old vehicle should disclose, and the BAT listing was clear about all of them. Pulling the data together one more time, this is what the buyer received for $84,000. They received a 1 of 100% serial production Grand National with the original VIN intact, original interior architecture preserved, with a stroker 249 cubic inch Buick V6 built by Weber Power Products in 2013, with Molnar rods and diamond pistons on a SCAT crank in billet main caps with an RJC main girdle, with Champion ported iron heads, an Accufab 70mm throttle body and matching plenum, a precision 210 by 210 roller cam through Hartland Sharp rockers, and a precision 67-65 turbocharger with a ported S-cover and a .63 AR turbine housing. They received a fueling and management system anchored by a fast XFI Sportsman with a 3-bar map sensor, 80-pound Siemens injectors, a Walboro 525 Hellcat lift pump, and an Alkycontrol single-nozzle methanol system. They received a Dave Husek-built 4-speed automatic with a Husek 245 high-stall converter, a Hughes deep pan, a B&M cooler, a Denny's 3-inch steel drive shaft, and a Metco loop. They received a quick performance 9-inch with Yukon 3.4-to-1 gears and Moser axles. They received Bilstein and Eibach front suspension with QA1 A-arms and sway bars and UMI rear control arms on a notch chassis. They received Wilwood 6-piston front and 4-piston rear brakes on slotted and cross-drilled rotors. They received Billet Specialties 18-inch staggered wheels on Nitto 555 G2 and NT 555 R2 tires. They received a refreshed cabin with cloth Turbo 6 embroidered seats, Autometer Sport Comp gauges, fast display, and a retro sound Bluetooth head unit feeding a 10-inch Alpine subwoofer. That is what $84,000 at Bring a Trailer bought. If you enjoyed this deep dive, Leave a like and subscribe for more thoroughly built American iron. Thanks for watching.